Hi everybody, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a player joining a game, only to find out that the Dungeon Master plans on things happening to women characters in a game of Dungeons & Dragons. A story about a Dungeon Master that is a bit trigger-happy when it comes to offing player characters, and much more. But before we get into those, if you like what I do here, I hope you consider critting that like button. If not for me, then perhaps I can entice you with a kitty. Simba can be pretty convincing. But with that said, let's get into some D&D horror stories. Was told something bad would happen to female player characters only. By Reddit user Foxy Moxie DM. Hi everyone. So this happened a couple months ago, and I just feel very bummed out about the entire thing. Would love some advice, encouragement, or anything to be honest. At the time, my in-person D&D group sort of fell apart due to the pandemic, and it never really started back up again. One of my friends recommended the D&D Discord to try and find an online group, and it sounded great. I DM'd a couple one-shots to warm up to the idea of using Roll20 and a mic, as I'm used to playing in person. It's my comfort zone. But I soon realized that with school getting busier, that I don't have time to plan as much, and decide I'd be better suited as a player. I find a particular listing by a DM for a particular anime world that I love, using the D&D 5e system. It promises a gritty, realistic environment. Okay. Great. I love low-level campaigns where the stakes feel a lot higher, so sign me up. So I asked if there are still openings, and the DM sent me a Google form to fill out. Basically, it asked what type of game you were looking for, if you were cool with homebrew, how comfortable you are with 5e rules, etc. All perfectly fine. Well, one question asked about sexual content, and you had to rate your comfort level from 1 to 10. I put down a 5, and it gave me a box to explain my answer. I mentioned that adult settings and jokes didn't bother me. I just didn't want to roleplay sexual situations. I'd rather kiss and fade to black basically, as I had played D&D with a couple guys when I first started out, who liked to describe the explicit sexual things they did to female NPCs. And being the only girl in the group, it wasn't my favorite thing. I left that first group pretty quick. Once I submitted the form, the DM asked me to do a voice interview with him and his girlfriend, who is one of the players, to check if I was a good fit or not. Sounds great, no problem. They first asked me if I wanted to play as a girl or a boy. I said girl. Then they got to the question about sexual content. I explained again what my limits were, and there was a pause on their end. The DM then explained to me that given that this was a realistic setting, if I acted stupid, then my character had a high possibility of being raped. He mentioned how his girlfriend had plenty of time to change her mind about a certain decision in their previous game, but she decided not to, and so he had to explain in explicit detail about how her character was raped by the monster. His girlfriend was giggling about it the entire time, which I don't understand. When I said that honestly I wouldn't be a good fit for this campaign, as I'm a survivor myself, he said that if I played a boy, then my character wouldn't have that happen to him, although it could still happen to the other players playing women. I again said no thank you, and we ended the call. I just feel sad, you guys. Is this common in online campaigns? I don't know if I'm being overly sensitive because of my past, but the idea of simulating rape in a game that's supposed to be an escape from this world, I don't know. I haven't played a single online game since then. TLDR, DM said that my character had a high chance of being raped in the campaign unless I played a boy, then described how his girlfriend's character was raped in their last game. Well, honestly, this story could have been a whole lot worse. At least this DM listed all the things that were going to be in his game before OP joined. It is a bit odd that the DM basically said that all female characters had a chance of that happening to them though. And I also kinda find it weird that the DM's girlfriend was giggling while the DM described what had happened to her character in a previous game. Though, to each their own, I guess. My advice to OP would be to not give up on finding a game online though. Sure, this game wasn't in your taste, nor many others' tastes I hope. And I'm sure that you would be able to find a game that would be worth your time, and with people that you may become longtime friends with. Just make sure that there's a session 0 where you can list what you don't want to be in a game beforehand. Let's move on. My Dungeon Master Loves Killing Us by Reddit user InnerCellist3307. Pretty sure this counts as a horror story. If not, I'll remove it. As stated in the title, our DM kills us constantly with BS stuff. We have a death every session, and he keeps laughing. He even has a little wall of dead characters on D&D Beyond, and he says he likes to look at them to feel better. He says he wears them as a badge of pride. I don't know if he is joking or what. I'm just tired that every time I make a new character, they die in 5 minutes. Once, he killed my character outside of session before. I even played him. And he has this thing where if you say one god's name, he just appears and TPKs you. He drove a poor lad to quit after they said it 3 times by accident. And it's not like these deaths are cool either. I mean, he literally sniped me once with 300 damage at the end of a session at level 7. He made me do a strength save, and I was a bard and got shot from 5 miles away. I signed up for a hard game, but not this, and all my mates hate it too. The problem is, besides this, the Dungeon Master is really good. There's plenty of roleplay and funny moments. He is just far too trigger happy. He constantly promises to go easy, but he never does. I'm not sure what to do. It's just, I can't put effort into a character that I know will be dead meat by next session, guaranteed. For clear numbers, I've died once or twice a session for the last 8 sessions, and the overall deaths, which I know from his weird mural, is 38 in 18 sessions, and that's permadeaths. We are playing Curse of Strahd, so we had a few resurrections, which would change the count. Honestly, if I were OP, I would just leave this table. I don't care how good the Dungeon Master is with roleplay or world building. None of that is worth anything if he just keeps on killing off players' characters willy-nilly. Like OP said, how could you be invested in any characters you make if you know that they are going to die for some BS reason? This story is a prime example of no D&D is better than bad D&D, because that sounds like some bad D&D. Though, what are your thoughts on this one? Have you ever experienced a trigger-happy Dungeon Master like this one? Be sure to let us know in the comments. But with that said, let's move on to the next post. Dungeon Master Rage Quiz because my character survived his death dungeon by Reddit user StarKiller303. So I met a Dungeon Master over the pandemic, and we had a lot of great games with our group. Also some weird ones. There are 2 stories that I'd like to share. The first is an exercise in why Dungeon Masters should keep an eye on substance intake while running sessions. Dungeon Master was running a long one-off that was on the more difficult side. 4 hours in, we're fighting this guy with a crazy high AC that takes quite a while. The Dungeon Master is slamming whiskeys and is starting to get noticeably drunk. It turns out, once we kill this guy, a demon slinks out of him. Now we have to fight this thing too. Fine, it's a lot of combat, but it's done well enough. Except at this point, the Dungeon Master is approaching blackout. He forgot what part of the boss fight we were in, and starts saying that we haven't killed the AC 25 guy yet. We had to convince him over a long period of time that we had already fought him, and that we're now halfway through the second boss. That game ended in a sloppy, sad state, where he basically just eventually said, "Sure, you guys killed the bad guy. Now I gotta go sleep." It was a disappointing end to the game. The second is how he left our group, which I was kinda sad about, but also confused. After he put together a hard game that I think he assumed that we would TPK in, and we actually did quite well, he sent me a message. The message says something like, quote, "I can't challenge you anymore. I don't know. I guess you win D&D. And then he disbanded the Discord server and blocked everyone we played with. Was he mad that I always make resilient characters? Was he mad that he didn't get to get his DM murder rocks off and TPK our party? Was he jealous of how I make my characters? If he wasn't such a wargamer himself, I might think that he's mad that I create optimized characters. I honestly have no idea what happened, but it was so strange and abrupt that I wanted to share. Humans are strange. Well, it certainly seemed like the Dungeon Master had a DM versus player mentality, and when he thought he finally made a game hard enough that he would get a TPK, but didn't, it just demoralized him. Especially if his comment about how OP and his party won D&D. It is pretty petty to delete all contact after that though, and it is quite sad that someone would toss away some friendships over not winning D&D. Definitely an odd one. Let's move on. Dungeon Master Kicks Me on the Way Out by Reddit user Chaser of Thunder. This was a while ago, during COVID, but someone reminded me of it recently. It was an online game I joined partway through, as some players were dropping out. We had players from 3 different countries, and 5 different time zones, which was a big reason the revolving door of players happened, but it wasn't the only one. The DM and cleric were dating, which let the cleric exist as both a co-DM and a player. Well, that can only turn out horribly. This led to an unpleasant dynamic, where the cleric would get priority in any roleplay, which made the game feel a bit follow the leader, and a bit railroady. On top of that, most out-of-game communication was too stressful for the DM herself, so the cleric would step in and, quote, mediate. She didn't care about what happened between players though, so I often ended up settling things on that side of the screen. A big issue was sleep. The campaign was at odd hours for everyone, with most players starting the game immediately after waking up or coming home from work. This led to a lot of people being late, which upset the DM. She felt her time wasn't respected, even though she was often late herself for the same reasons. Instead of communicating this, the DM and cleric surprised us with a new rule. If any player was late, they'd have to roll on a table. Whatever they rolled would happen to their character at some point during the session. The DM, however, would receive no penalty for being late, and none of us were allowed to know what was on the table, except the cleric, of course. We only knew that it ranged from inconvenient to, quote, some more serious things. That is some BS right there. A dungeon master punishing a player in-game for out-of-game issues is a pretty big red flag for any game of D&D. I had a major problem with this, as my only boundary when agreeing to the game was to not be punished in character for out-of-character issues. I private messaged the DM, reminding her of the boundary, and that I would be alright with the rule if it worked both ways, and everyone knew what was on the table. She shut down, and cleric came in, brushing me off completely. So I went to the public chat about it and got the rule dropped once the other players understood what was happening. Things started changing after that. From then on, I got almost no roleplay opportunities. I'm pretty sure the DM had me muted for all or at least parts, of some sessions as well. My questions got ignored, and suddenly, my character was targeted more in combat. After a couple more weeks, I asked about leaving the game on amicable terms, as it clearly wasn't working out. Both Cleric and DM immediately accepted. We planned a good exit, where my character found his way back to some good family. The other player characters threw a goodbye party for him. During a bout of drunken magical sparring, the DM became so enraged that she left the table without saying anything, and the cleric promptly blamed me, and we ended the session. Both the cleric and DM blew up at me later when I tried to ask them what I did to upset her. The DM claimed that I was the worst player in her history of DMing, and that I actively ruined the campaign for everyone on purpose because I wouldn't be around for the consequences. She went on to say that everyone thought I was rude and uncooperative from the beginning, and that me leaving hadn't come soon enough for them. I woke up the next morning having been kicked from the server. The reason given was that Cleric and DM assumed that I would sabotage the party loot list that my character had been in charge of as some kind of retaliation, and they didn't have the energy to worry about or suffer me further. When I apologized to the other players, they were confused, and there was a collective WTF about the loot list accusation, as it was all done transparently in a public chat. They told me that I had been great to play with, that the DM and Cleric had told everyone that I'd left on my own accord, and that my character had been murdered off-screen, in his sleep, at the beginning of the next session. I also found out that there had been no rules against what I'd done. The other players, aside from the Cleric, had thought it was funny, and everyone was confused as to why it had upset the DM so much. I was informed a while later that the campaign had fallen apart not long after. TLDR, DM and her co-DM PC girlfriend cross a boundary, push me out, and convince me that I was hated by everyone when I wasn't. Well, at least OP did the right thing when they figured out that the Dungeon Master was being petty about OP essentially getting the rest of the players to be against the in-game punishments for being late sometimes, by letting the DM know that they were going to leave the game, but play it out in-game so OP's departure made sense. I wonder why the Dungeon Master got so upset at OP for doing some magic sparring during their final session with the group. Maybe the DM was just angry that OP wanted to leave. Then, of course, the DM and Cleric had to be petty and lie about OP being the worst player they ever had, and tell OP that the other players thought the same. At least OP was able to clear things up with the other players, and maybe down the road they can all play together again, but with a different DM. Let's move on to the next post. Am I the a-hole for not having my character engage in romance I don't want? By Reddit user SecretPapaya5129. So, I'm not exactly sure if this counts as a horror story, but something I want to get off my chest. I'm currently part of this group I have been playing with for 2 months. It's a low-level homebrew campaign, and I'm playing a tiefling wizard. Recently, the other players have been pushing for my character to get romantically involved with the party's fighter. Out of character, I said no, and so did the fighter player. But ever since then, in and out of game, the players have been bugging me to try pursuing a romance between these characters, and I keep firmly saying no. My character would not be interested in the fighter. When I wrote my character's backstory for the DM, I specifically included a small part about my character's romantic hangups, and if romance was to occur, the kind of person he would be drawn to, who was in no way like the fighter. I am personally getting sick of these players trying to push this romance on my character. It makes me feel like if a suitable romance option for my character does come up, it's just gonna cause drama because I didn't go with who they wanted. I just don't know what to do. Well, that does sound like that could get annoying really quickly. And OP is in no way the a-hole here. My advice to OP would be to lay out everything they did in this post to the other players, and let them know how much it is bothering them. Then, if it doesn't stop, I would threaten to just quit the campaign. Though, that is just what I would do. What would you guys suggest? On to the next one. Player started insulting another player over something really stupid. By Reddit user ConsciousDisk7290. I started an online game with 4 players. Before starting, we had discussed that there will be no discussion of in-real-life racism or bigotry of any kind. We had played for 3 sessions, and the game was going good. There was just one player, June, who I thought at times didn't let the others talk and could be a bit argumentative about whenever she made a mistake in combat or rolled poorly. She just had to win. One of the players, August, said that he couldn't join the 4th session because his brother was having a baby and he had to go to a gender reveal party. I said fine, and that we'll not focus on continuing the story much for that session. June, however, started talking about how it made no sense for him to go. It wasn't his baby, and that gender reveals were stupid and whatnot. August said that he had to because his entire family was going to be there. They kept arguing in the group if gender reveal parties should exist or not. June, somehow, started blaming August and his family for setting fires and polluting rivers. He said she was stupid, that his family just cut a cake and had lunch together. The other players started telling June to let it go and that she was going too far. Then she started arguing with me about how I said that I won't allow bigotry and that gender reveal parties were bigoted in nature and shouldn't happen. I told her that this didn't make sense and to stop the useless argument. Now, every other player has complained about her and asked me to remove her from the group. Now, that is a really stupid reason to get into an argument. Maybe June just didn't like the fact that August missing the session meant that the story would not progress for that session. Don't get me wrong, there are gender reveal parties where people do stupid things, like have explosions or some other things that either injure someone or pollute the environment. But I don't think there is anything wrong with the way August's family was planning on doing it, with just having a colored cake. Then, for June to yell at OP about how they are bigoted in nature is really stupid. Now, as far as the other players wanting to remove June from the game, I think there may be other factors for that besides this dumb argument. And that is up to OP and the players to figure out. Let's move on. Some people in this hobby are straight up psychos. By Reddit user Mr. Tricorder. Occasionally, I'm running a Monster of the Week style beginner's game. Just some basic adventures with whoever shows up. These games are aimed at newbies to show them the ropes, and, of course, recruit some of them into other games. Since there's a lot of younger players, I keep playing things PG-13. I don't mind the occasional veteran player joining as well, as long as they're fine with sitting back while I tend to the younglings, or helping out yourself. Now, get a hold of these 2 guys, and how I kick them out. The cast. Me, the GM. Edgelord, an older newbie player. I suspect he wasn't new, just got kicked out too often. Elitist, veteran player and RP elitist that was absolutely full of himself. And some newbies that didn't say much. You'll understand why. My other table rules for these games are simple. No evil characters, only PG-13, and cooperate. Edgelord was immediately confused by my no evil player character rule. For a newbie, he had suspiciously familiar arguments against it. Evil characters can be great storytelling devices, and stuff like this. That's too complicated in a casual group with newbies. This game is meant to be as simple as possible, so I told him so and disallowed it. The elitist immediately jumped on that discussion with further arguments. How I, as a GM, can't interfere with player agency. Blah blah blah. I shut that down too. This is a tutorial group for newbies, for crying out loud. Want to play a storytelling epic about your edgy character? Find a different table then. These guys sulked, but it was pretty clear that I wasn't budging, so they agreed to leave it. Quest of the day was a bandit camp that got too dangerous to be handled for the town's guard, because someone with magic seemed to be helping the bandits. The group moved out, dealt with some crazy druid, and arrested the rest of the bandits, all of it being nice clean PG-13 action. Edgelord wasn't having it though. Before the guardsmen arrived to lock away the bandits, he took a female bandit aside for questioning, but instead of asking a question, something like this came out. Edgelord: I want to cut all the tendons in her limbs, and make her crawl and squirm on the floor, with her useless limbs. The table was shocked. Emergency banhammer was ready. I argued that it's pretty high on the scale of sadism, especially for this game, so I'm taking the character over as an evil NPC, following the rule that evil characters are not allowed. Elitist immediately jumped to defend his buddy. At first, they tried to make a case on how the bandit's life is inconsequential, and it shouldn't matter in any way what happens to them. I think it says a lot about their mindset, if that's what you go for to defend your deeds. Their second point was that the bandits were to be executed anyway. Yeah, this isn't getting better. The sad thing is, they seem to believe this an overall acceptable mindset IRL, but I wasn't going to listen to any further of their BS, and I'm not entertaining anyone's murder boner. Thus, the banhammer was deployed for both. Well, I have to say good on OP for sticking up for his rules. Those two were definitely murder hobos that wanted nothing more than to be edgy when it came to the game, even though OP laid out the rules off the bat. So, it just sounds like those two edgelords tried to F around and found out. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, especially if you like and subscribe, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.